Hello, welcome to another Random Code stream. My name is Jason Bach, and I'm going down a rabbit hole. I once again have found an issue that, get my music going here, that turns out to be more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And again, we are really going into an edge case here that I don't think anybody's ever going to hit. This is almost becoming, in some ways, kind of like a sense of pride to get out of the weeds with this one and come up with a solution. And I think I can do it. It's not, to me, an insurmountable problem. It's getting tricky. And again, it's something that rocks could end up becoming the mocking framework that everybody uses and gets millions of downloads, and I doubt anybody would ever do what I'm running into. But I still want to try to figure this out and resolve it. So anyway, that's life, right? As a developer. As I found out in the last stream, that if we have optional parameters and a params parameter, where the params parameter is a ref-like type, like a read-only span or span, then we still have to make this second overload when we're doing the expectation generation for that method. If there isn't any optionals, we don't. But if there's an optional and we have a ref-like params type, what's ending up happening is that the optionals have to be declared before it. Can't be after it. You can't move them around. You can move them before required ones, but you can't move them after params. So nothing's going to be after the params. But since they have to be before, excuse me, since they have to be before, and we're not actually making a params parameter, we're using the ref struct argument there, because passing in params there makes no sense, because you can't convert that into a ref struct argument that has that. You either have to say, I don't care about the ref struct argument value, or I'm going to pass in a predicate to say, here's how I'm going to look at the params values. You can't pass in a ref struct and carry that along with the ref struct type. It's not allowed. Well, at the very least, it would fundamentally restructure how we'd have to handle expectations, the whole encompassing type. And we just can't do that. So, so the point is, what we're going to have to do is put, in that case, we have to restructure just for the expectation, that one parameter, to put the attributes on it and not the default value. That's what you're seeing here with this first bullet point. So if we run into this case, we have to take that optional argument and say we're going to put optional and default parameter value on it. And then it will act still like an optional, but that won't get into the way of our params, which is good. That's what we want. And just to make sure that I am correct in this, public interface I stuff void do. Let's grab this or perform. It doesn't matter. And now if we would say params read only span of string See, that's fine. We can do that. What we can't do, or we could do that too. We must include the attributes and not put the default value at the parameter. But we can. Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah. Because if we could do this, we could. But this ends up being like just another value. And so what you're seeing here is optional parameters must appear after all the required, unless you change it to this and then we make this a string. And see, then that's okay. So that's where this comes into play. We have to transform it to that. And then when we're defining the mock or the make, we're including the attributes, but we cannot send the parameter to the default value. So that's actually a bug with optionals. That we just are not. If a parameter is optional with the attributes. Right. And it doesn't use the attributes, and we must define the optional parameter with the second pass overload with the attributes. So that, yeah. And then there's just write tests. Okay. And with this case, it is only with the second overload. We don't have to do anything when we're generating either the creates or the makes, those mock types. So there's basically 3 things we have to do. And yeah, that gets fun. And this really has nothing to do with the expectation stuff we're doing. But again, this is kind of actually we're throwing in a bug here. Where if you have an optional declared with the attributes, we're actually generating it with the value as well in the mock, and we can't do that. Oh, tangled web we weave. So let's do this first with the method. So the recognizing of explicit default value and parameters, params, and ref life, I think that's all okay. It's when we come into... Actually, I meant up here. This is all okay. When we're trying to detect... So this is also interesting because we're putting here type name requires an allable parameter. But what we also need to do here is now change this so that if the last parameter is a params ref-like type, then we need to change this such that we're putting the attributes there with the explicit default value, whatever that is. Else, so we might need a local method here within the local method. Get optional parameter. So we could have a static string get optional parameter where we are taking parameter model parameter, and we also actually need And since we're doing a select here, that's an enumerable over this. Or specifically this. So I think what we want to do here is for our last parameter. This just keeps getting funner. Because I don't think I'm going to be able to just arbitrarily in here say, go look at the last parameter. Although that would be nice to do. We could assume in here we could get the last one. Let's just... because we're calling this in a very specific case. Okay. We're going to call this when we know we have an optional parameter. So it wouldn't be the last, and we need to look at the last. So if the last parameter is ref type is params and last parameter type is ref-like, then what we need to do is say here return this. Okay. No. Now, if it is a params and it is ref-like, what we want is this. Except with this, whoops, not that, this. And we do not put the value here. We put it in there. And now we have to global this dot optional global this dot default parameter value. Okay, so we could actually inline that there and say if you have an explicit default value, then you say get optional parameter method.parameters this is something I should type name requires nullable. Else. Why isn't it giving me the hat thing here? Whatever. So that gets us that. And so now that should be generated correctly with the optional parameter. Now we're going to want to do the same thing with the indexer, unfortunately. I don't want to expose this like an extension method on parameter model, because this gets to be a little I'm surprised we're doing this here. Why are we doing build name? Oh, maybe we're doing it. Maybe because of the type arguments and trying to close the generic. I don't know. It just seems weird that we're doing that. I'm trying to also think of not repeating so much code. But it is what it is. Now, if we go back to the params generator test, generate params and method is rough struct and optionals exist. Okay, so let's now regenerate and see what we get. This is also illustrating what sometimes happens as a developer, which is even putting this off for like 2 days is it's hard to come back to context, you know. And I think that's like when they say you get into a flow with something, it's not just like it's anything you do. If you sometimes putting the thing down because you're stuck and you don't know how to go through with it is good, because you can walk away and let your mind take a rest. But that wasn't the case here. I knew where to go. I just didn't have time. I had to move on and do my day job. So I had to come back to this. And of course, then trying to get back into what is it that I'm actually doing gets to be a little tough. So, all right. So we say a do here. Okay. Which is the value. But now we detect, oh, it did work. Nice. Then we have this here. So we pass in is the value. And then we just pass over args. Nice. Now if we come over to the actual mock here, we still do this thing right. And we still do that right. So that's actually good. Okay, so now we need to do the make. Okay. And I feel like even if I get this to where it works and all the tests pass, I really want to think through what I did, because I want to make sure it makes sense. Okay, so we come through. Okay, optionals exist without attributes, because now we want one that does have attributes. And this is like the edge case of edge cases. Nobody's really going to do this, but that means somebody's going to do it. And so I got to keep it in mind. So when we come here, Like, I don't think you can just say optional. Well, you can. No, I don't want to go into developer tools. I wanted to like say, what does optional actually do? So it doesn't seem like the compiler puts any thing on this to say that it has, you have to have both. C#, yes. Scolders fan, I think that's what it is. Yes, it's C#. But it doesn't make sense to say something is optional without having default value. So you'd want to, and to say it has a default doesn't make it optional either. Right? So let's come back here. If I looked at optional here, indicates that a parameter is optional. Yay! Default parameter value. Sets default parameter when a call from the language that supports default parameters. This class cannot be inherited. Yay! Even what's the key stopping you from switching to Linux? I'm using Visual Studio. And this is my computer, and I play games on it and do a bunch of other stuff, so I have nothing against Linux. That's probably why, though. So, there's nothing that says either one of these has to, one or the other exists, but it really doesn't make sense to say something is just optional. Like, that doesn't really help you as a developer. Nor just saying default value. You'd really want to have both of these on there. And again, doing this is something that no C# developer would ever do, but that means somebody's going to do it. So what we also need to do is, do we have darn it. I was hoping that I already had. I've got this. What is... Wait. Do we preserve on our type attributes? We get an attributes description, but we don't. Okay, hold on. I'm doing like 20 different things and wait. Whoa. Hold on. Oh, that's params and method. Okay. Did I ever rerun this? Okay, so now it passes. But what we also want is a test. And optional is this with attributes. Okay, so now we're going to do the system runtime interop services. And we're going to say here Let's just pull this. Ah! Too much. Way off tabs. Okay, so... because I believe... I don't think... has explicit default value when we're picking it up. Hey, Electron. When we're picking it up, that it's going to detect that. I really don't know. This is only just going to say, hey, if it's this is just for that expectation method. What I'm really more concerned about in this case is, what does this do when we basically generate code? So let's find out. Okay, so I do that. So what happens here? Well, we put that here, which is nice. Now what happens when we actually declare the mock? We say optional attribute, default parameter attribute. This is the other case, though. This is not necessarily a bug with... This is a bug, but this isn't a bug that came up with this params ref-like type thing. It's been there for a long time. Nobody, though, as far as I know, has used rocks where they pass in, where their method or their indexer has a optional parameter that's using the optional and default parameter value attributes. Otherwise, they would have ran into this. So what this is going to do is going to tell me that, well, if you have these here, you can't... Here, let me go back to NetLab here. If you already have those attributes on there, you can't do this. It's going to yell at you. The compiler is definitely aware of that. Okay. So, because of that... we have this small bug that we're going to need to fix anyway because this is showing up. Excuse me. So what we really want this to be in this case is to say, don't put the value there if it's using the attributes. So we're pulling the attributes up because we just... Rocks by default will say for any parameter, if there's any attributes on it, just stick them here. And so that's what we're doing here. But then we also say if it's an optional, put the optional value there, which is not correct. Okay. So a couple things are getting into the way here. We need to now also say, well, let's also see what happens when we generate the make. Wait, well, what? Sorry. I gotta put that back in here. Otherwise, even though the test would eventually fail, it's not going to actually generate and show me the second generated code pass for the make stuff. So we gotta put that in there for now. So it's definitely not brain surgery, but it feels like it. And so you can see here too, we're doing the same thing, which when we generate the method signature. So hopefully we can do that. It depends on how I did this. So these are the method parameters for both void and value. So if it has an explicit default value and it requires explicit implementation, then we're trying to stick the value in here. Otherwise, we say string empty. Okay. And I really should follow my convention with ternaries to do that, because I find that easier to read if I'm doing a ternary. Populate switch. How about no? I don't want to do that. Guess I could do that here too. And we're going to have to do this for the value builder as well. But I think, if I remember right, this is used for both indexers and methods, which is good. Just doing a little bit of code cleanup here. Okay, and of course we have it down in here, but that's within an interpolated string, and it's hard to do it that way. So this is what we want to do here, which is we want to say if it can, if the that type attributes contains optionals, then we say string.empty, else we do that. So what am I doing here? What I'm saying is I could look for a default parameter value, but I'm assuming that if you're using optionals, optional, that would have been bad. That you don't need, you're going to use default parameter value along with it. I could put a check in here to say if it has this and it has this, then we do that. Because again, I don't see why you would have one or the other in C# if you're declaring it this way. Because if you're saying it's optional, well, if you don't, the whole point of an optional parameter is that it has a default value. Right? I think. Because that way you don't have to provide it, and the compiler will put in line what the default value is there at the call site. So I think that would take care of it here for the default value. And for the void builder, that also does that. So now I think if that's true, that should have fixed that. And then when we come down here, that should have fixed that. Does it? Nope. No, it does not. Ah, this window sucks. Well, that ain't right. What is it doing? Time to... Ah. Kind of hard to debug tests when you're in release mode. So this parameter is the value. Does not require explicit implementation. The method shouldn't. And the attribute description. Oh, sorry. Not on the type. On that itself. On the parameter itself. Still didn't work. Oh, because of make, yeah. Jeez. Same thing. Okay. This is, again, where I really, really, really need to do some serious refactoring of my code, because this is becoming untenable. I have way too much repeated, and I have to spend the time to go through and say, what can I move into common methods so that I don't have to remember when I'm doing this, I got to do it here, 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 and here. That's just not a good position to be in, but it is where I am. Okay, if that makes sense. Now we pass. Okay, that's good. So how many tests we still have broken in this class? 2. Which ones? Generating params method does not restruct and optionals exist. Optional exists. So what's the problem? Oh, that ain't right either. What did I do here? Yeah, okay. That's why. We lost the interpolation when I copied things around. Okay. There. So now we come here, and what did we break? Do we still have one broken? Nope, they all pass. What about optional arguments? 2 passed, 2 failed. Okay, what fails here now? Because we might have broken something with this. How did... Okay, well, we should not be doing that. It should be this. I don't know how that ever got past the compiler, but... Oh, and this one we just never... Okay. By the way, if you're new to the channel, you haven't subscribed, please do so. I would greatly appreciate it. I am getting close on time. And that's okay, because if we don't finish this, I can come back to it later. Probably Saturday morning. And that failed. Why did that fail? Okay, what's the diagnostic? Optional parameters must appear after all required parameters. Oh. I know what the problem is. Is that here, when we're generating this, is that we have to basically do the same thing that we're doing before, which is that if it has the optionals there, doesn't matter. This is not the case where we're worrying about params. This is just simply an optional that's out of order because it used the params builder. So we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. What we do need to worry about, though, and I still need to hit the indexers. I'm surprised that hasn't... Well, we probably don't have tests in there for the indexers just yet. Okay. So here what we need to do is say what we're doing over here, which is to look at the attribute description and say if the parameter attribute description contains this, then what we want to do well, let's do this first. So if it's this, this, this. But if it is optional, we want to do what we're doing here, except right, that's what we want to do. We want to preserve all that. Because we're only calling this because we know it's an optional parameter. We're just trying to figure out what the way is to generate it. Okay. So before I forget, I need to put especially indexers. I cannot forget that. Okay, so let's I think the make is correct because we're putting the optional attributes on that. We don't have the value there, and then we have string data, so we just need to regenerate the create. Hopefully this will fix it. So now we have the yeah. So does this work? It does. Where are we at with just unit tests now? If I run all of them. One fails. That's okay. Generate when optionals is defined with attribute. Ah, yes, because we need to pull that off. Right. So let's regen this. What now? Make. What's wrong with the make? Oh, we just need to pull the... Okay. Now they all pass. Okay, so we're making progress. 268. Finally got optionals and params. Ref like working. All unit tests pass. It does not mean that the other tests pass though. But we have made progress. That's good. It's a good feeling to be in, that I feel like I'm now getting out of the rabbit hole. So, to review, when defining expectations, we must include the attributes and not put the default. Yes, so that's done. Define in mocker make, we include the attributes. Yes, now we fix that. So that's fixed. Yes, we've done that now too. And we definitely need to make sure that we have all unit and integration tests for all these scenarios, especially indexers. Code gen tests must pass. All right, but again, let's just update the docs here real quick. So that's their updated notes. This is a good place to end though. So I feel like I now am swimming my way back out of the hole, which is good. I'm actually technically fixing very small bugs with optional arguments, especially if you use attributes. I'm also handling the case where you have the whole thing with params was to get the second overload to be more friendly with params. And we're now addressing that, especially with ref-like params types and optionals in play. So they're, again, very small things that most developers won't run into. But one of the core tenets of Rocks is that if you can do it in C#, Rocks should be able to handle it. There should be no limitations. If you can define an interface with methods and indexers and properties with all various pointers and ref-like or ref-struct types, blah, blah, blah. all these different attributes. Rocks should be able to mock that. And that's why I'm doing this, because I'm trying to get into the what if this would happen case. And I've found over and over again that over the years that there are things that people do that I did not expect. And it's these cases that are valid, but I didn't consider. So that's kind of why I'm going a little bit farther with this, because especially I know there are issues with what I had, but there are issues that, again, people haven't done yet, but the framework isn't super popular. So it's not like I'm getting a ton of people to use it, though. I'll end on this. If I go to rocks here and I go to NuGet packages, I did notice that, well, we're getting now this was released 2 months ago. 2 months ago, really? All right, so in December of a month and that, yeah, it's almost 2 months. But in 2 months' time, we've already had 7,700 downloads, which you look at some of the other mocking frameworks, there's a lot more. And it's not a numbers game. I'm not trying to do a numbers game here and say, well, I did more or less than this person, but it is kind of encouraging. I don't know why this one ended at 10,000 here, but, it somehow is getting a tiny little bit more noticing. I don't know why, but it is. So the more people that use it, the more people are going to be like, hey, why doesn't it do this? Or why does this not work? And the more I find out about that, the better. So in any event, I'm going to be done with this for now. I think I'm going to probably just finish this all up off camera because I'm close. I think I'm almost done with this, and I think this is the time to put this to rest. If I still need more work, I'll let you know in the next stream. But for now, I'm done. Thank you all for watching. I want to, again, ask if you have not subscribed, please do so. I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm going to be doing another Lego Lord of the Rings stream this afternoon starting around 4 or 4:30 p.m. So stop by and watch that if you'd like. But for now, I'm done with this stream. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the future.